This is the all-new Range Rover Sport SV, replacing the brutish, incredible SVR. But the new SV is something different, more composed, more different, better, worse? Well, that's what we're going to find out in this review of the all-new Range Rover Sport SV. The new Range Rover Sport SV speaks with restraint. It doesn't shout. It follows some of the design guidelines or design cues compared to the previous SVR, but it follows with the Range Rover and the Range Rover Sport. They are very simplified, simple lines, tight, and it hides the weight. And we'll talk about all the design changes that the SV brings to this Sport as well. Down here you have a much bigger grille to get more air into the coolers, but also to give this a more masculine appearance. But it doesn't go overboard compared to, for example, Urus. This is very dignifying. But if you go up a little bit, you have this carbon roof, or not carbon roof, a carbon bonnet, but it's actually painted, and that is because this is the Gaia edition for the Celestial collections. This is the highest level of Range Rover Sport SV that you can absolutely get. Unfortunately, on the bonnet is where one of the form over function design choices have been made. This is not a real air vent, so form over functionality, and the same on the side here. At the heart of the new SV, you do not find a supercharged V8 with 5 liters. Instead, you find the BMW-derived 4.4 liter twin turbo V8, codenamed S63, that gives this 635 horsepower and 750 Nm, up to 800 Nm in launch control mode. And if you look closely, you see this quite unique cover, the carbon fiber on the bonnet here, and you also see some unique design changes to make this fit into the Range Rover Sport as well. But this is an incredible engine, but it does not have the same sound as the previous engine, that's for sure. And is it for better? Is it for worse? Well, we'll talk about that a little bit later on. As you might imagine, this SV is just not a few parts thrown at it. This is the real deal. And continuing on with the changes for the SV, this has the 6D hydraulically cross-linked dampers that basically replaces anti-roll bars. Same tech as in a McLaren or a Ferrari. This also has the optional carbon ceramic brakes. Rotors, of course, are in carbon ceramics, but these ones so massive. One of the biggest ones fitted to an SUV, and they do stop this car. And they need to be big because this car weighs 2.5 tons. Yes, 2.5 tons. So how do you make this agile? Well, I talked about that 6D hydraulic system, but you also have rear steering, or rear wheel steering that is, to help with agility, but also when you are driving around tight corners and parking spaces. But this is quite different compared to the previous SVR. This is more advanced, more tech heavy. Is it necessarily a good thing? Have they make everything too complicated with the tech? And the price. The Edition 2 starts at just around 220,000 euro. This Celestial Gaia Edition, or Gaia Bespoke Edition, whatever you want to call it, cost just north of 290,000 euros. That puts it into very unique stratosphere of cars, such as the Porsche Cayenne Turbo GT, the Lamborghini Urus, and even the Performante there, the Audi RSQ8 and the Mercedes G63. There are a whole lot of cars, even the new Ferrari Purosangue. And where does this stand in that competition? Well, we're going to find that out just a little later when we start driving the car, because that's where I think things will start to make sense. The rear connects the front in a very well proportioned manner. You see the tight design that is with the new Range Rover design language. I do like it. It flies under the radar compared to a lot of the competition. So this doesn't shout as much. It has a smart suit, but it goes to the gym and knows a few tricks. And we cannot forget how this car sounds. The Range Rover Sport SV is supposed to be usable, of course, and especially with the size of this car, you should be able to fit a lot of things in the boot space, and that you will do because you have a lot of space here. A flat loading lip, and you can even raise and lower the ride height of the car from the button on the side here. You can even fold down the rear seats. Huge amount of room, and this sets it apart compared to some of the competition. And in the rear seat you have a lot of head space. However, the knee space and the foot space is a little bit limited, which I was not expecting. However, the front seats are very hard and they are quite aggressively bolted. We'll talk about them later. So yeah, they could have been a little bit softer here in the back. However, you get a lot of lower thigh support. One of the best ones that I've had in a car, and you can even lean the seat in your preferred angle. You even have a huge panoramic sunroof. This is, as I said before, the Gaia curation, which gives this a little bit unique materials all around. And this is supposed to be more eco-friendly, and it feels like a mix between regular fabric and leather, and it's quite an interesting design. However, in this type of car for this price, this looks a little bit too cheap for my liking. And welcome to the place where you will spend the majority of your time in this new Range Rover Sport SV, and that is of course the driver's seat. And what a place to be. There's a lot of tech to go through, so I hope you will find that interesting. But it is such an important part of the Sport and also the SV, and especially this new SV. You can see here on top you have flappy pedals, and if you go into SV mode, which is the most aggressive mode, everything turns red, so indicating that you are in the most aggressive setting. Also have this button to go straight into the SV mode instead of having to press here and then into SV mode. So a quick button. But as you saw, you have modes to go into or activate the valves in the exhaust to open it up a little bit, traction control. But if you are in normal, the auto terrain response, so the car is doing what it thinks it needs to do depending on which road you're driving. Off-road, which this is supposed to be able to do, 23-inch rims and low-profile tires will not be optimal, but it can because it's a Range Rover. But this is the PV Pro latest generation infotainment system from Range Rover. I think it's quite usable, very effective. However, there's no buttons here, only the start and stop button and the buttons on the steering wheel. And some of the things are hidden quite deep, especially the bass or bass or the sound in the seats or vibration in the seats. So if I press body and soul seats, there are up to 5, and it enhances the sound experience, so it vibrates. Quite unique actually. This new engine made the car feel very different, because it was completely different from a boisterous, rumbling, mechanical, dinosaur-like sound to something much more refined, more efficient, quicker, more athletic. It has changed its identity, it has changed its demeanor, but the path, the intent is very clear, and that is to make a super luxurious, high performance SUV. And I do like this new approach with an ultra luxurious SUV that has the capabilities to demolish almost anything on the road. The discs and the calipers are enormous, and they are needed to stop this juggernaut. And it feels like you're driving a safe, a very advanced safe. Does it stand out? Does it do enough? Is it quick enough? Well, that is the question. And I was worried when I heard about the engine being different, the changes to all the technical advancements. Yes, it's incredible to have all the tech that you can have or might want in a car like this. But I just felt the SVR was so incredibly old school in all the best ways. But the gearbox, the smoothness from the engine, the extremely mild or very mild hybrid system as well, fills in the torque gaps. The gearbox does an amazing job at shifting, basically seamless. Then the insulation that you have in this car, the quietness, the sound system, the tech that is up to the level that you expect from a car of this caliber. There's not much to complain about here, other than the fact that if there's one celestial collection that I would choose, it's not this Gaia. Yes, it has that incredibly matte green paint and the fabric that is both like a mixture of regular textile and leather. Unfortunately, it does look a little bit too cheap, and what a car should not look like is cheap in this price category. So I would go for Sol, for example. I also love that you have buttons on the steering wheel. While they're not the most nicely looking or logically placed, you get used to them. And the right side is only for the cruise control, everything else is to control the track that you're in and to control the digital gauge cluster. You even have a head-up display, but that is not up to par with a lot of the other competition, especially Mercedes. I've driven 200 kilometers, not that much, and it's been a lot in the city, but also some highway miles as well. I've averaged 1.8 liters per 10 kilometer. It is a lot, but if you look at the official stats compared to the previous engine, this new turbocharged V8 is more efficient, not as thirsty, and it doesn't pollute as much. The carbon emissions are not as bad as it once was. If we're talking about luxury, this does it very differently. You might not expect it, but this car flies under the radar, even with this incredible paint. Because of the shape of this new Range Rover Sport, it is so tight, it hides the heft of it, makes it athletic while not too aggressive. We're on a more twisty road and we'll start in the auto terrain response. And they're supposed to read what I'm doing with my throttle, with my steering inputs, and behave accordingly. And right now I'm driving more normal. And you feel the softness of the suspension. You get a little bit of lean into the bends as well. It's not as loud either, but it soaks up the bumps and it's perfect for a side road. You have the necessary agility from the car from the get-go. Very soft steering, not that communicative maybe. So let's switch it over to dynamic. And then you chuck it into a corner here. It's very, very stable mid-corner. Doesn't necessarily want to peg down a gear unless you give that last amount of gas. But this is somewhere in between. It's not super aggressive, but it sharps it up just a little bit. But the biggest change is of course in SV mode, which you can reach either through the button on the steering wheel or on the mode button up top. And it's warning me to not have heavy load or cargo on the roof, and maybe that's a good warning to have. And it automatically goes into the sport mode on the gearbox, much quicker at kicking down. And the brakes, a lot of things are happening. The 60 hydraulic suspension, the rear steer, the active differential, the four-wheel drive or all-wheel drive system that does torque vectoring, sending power to the outside, to the inside. There's a lot of things happening, and you almost feel that there is a certain layer of disconnection on this car that wasn't existing in the previous SVR. That felt much more mechanical. But for ultimate control, you have the flappy pedals behind the steering wheel as well. The way that you can chuck it into corners and it just behaves is nothing short of incredible. I cannot emphasize that enough. This car does so many things really, really well. But by doing so, they've had to make sacrifices. They wanted to make it ultra luxurious. So they have to tone down the aggressiveness sort of it. And what did they do to make up for it? Well, they threw a lot of tech to it, and it's worked to a certain degree. It's easy to complain that you're losing the character of the supercharged 5-liter V8, and you have a more muffled twin turbocharged V8 from BMW. Don't worry, if there's speed you want, there's plenty in this new Sport SV. It's a SUV, right? So you do sit high up, and this is a very big car, but it hides the weight very, very well. You would fool me if you would say that this was 2.5 tons. And I'm chucking this through corners like nobody's business. And it just eats. There's no fade in the brakes whatsoever, and it just changes direction the way you want a sports car of this caliber. Maybe the downshifts are not as quick as I would like, but even on the limit, it talks back to you. You find the limit extremely easy, and if you just need to have more bite, more feel, more of everything, you switch away from these all-terrain tires and go for the more aggressive Cup 2. It's confidence inspiring. You can push it, you find the limit of it very easily. It feels safe pushing it. And while driving at neck-breaking speeds that a car of this size should not do, you're reminded that you're sitting in a car that is delivering this level of luxury. The duality. Blending luxury performance in a way that not many other car manufacturers or competitors can. The new Range Rover Sport SV is more than basically everything that the previous SVR was. But is that necessarily better? Yes, it is quicker, it's more refined, it's more advanced. But it doesn't have the character, the brutishness, the amazingness, the magic that made the SVR an SVR. This is more mature, and this obviously takes that more exclusive, more refined, more luxurious route, and it blends that together so well with the sportiness. But the sportiness has not been the major focus. The focus have been blending these two seamlessly. And that the SV does incredibly well and makes it stand out in the competitive segment of performance SUVs.